I'm Miriam Joy and welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make QuikWood feathers, or you could use any other type of clay that you may want to. It's fast drying, and this is our mold, so we can make them all kinds of different shapes and sizes. So this is a real fun project, so let's get started. Okay, for our feathers today, like I said, I'm going to be using a two-part feather mold, and we're just going to kind of squish it in. But I'm going to be using QuikWood. Like I said, if you wanted to be using a different type of clay, just remember QuikWood dries a lot faster, but use whatever you're comfortable with. But you may want to think about how it will come out of your mold. That might be something that would work a little bit different than the way I'm going to demonstrate it today. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some vegetable spray, and yes, you can use Pam. I'm going to spray some on my roller and some on my wax paper, and then from the wax paper I've got it onto my hands as well. Number one rule when you're working with QuikWood is take all your jewelry off, because rock hard means rock hard even in your jewelry. This is a roller, wooden roller that we have now to work with your QuikWood at miriamjoy.com. So depending on how big you want your feather to be is how much clay you want to be. You could even do small ones to do earrings or necklaces or all kinds of fun things for your art projects. I'm going to try and do a little bit smaller one this time. So I'm going to cut off a small amount. I'm going to take the end of that off and put that back in there. This is a two-piece epoxy. It lasts a really long time. We're talking years when you store it right. Take off the piece of plastic. Most important, I have so many people can't figure out what's wrong with it, and they forgot to take off the piece of plastic. And you activate it by rubbing it together, molding it together, over kneading it is the word I'm looking for. Again and again, you have the marbleized look. You need that to go all the way to activate it, otherwise it will not dry. If you ever have some clay, it's not dry, that is what is wrong with it. So we have lots of videos on Miriam Joy 123 YouTube using the QuikWood. I love the QuikWood. I use it for lots of different things. So we've already got that all nice and done, and I want to roll it out before I put it in. We want to think about our feather shapes. Some you may want with real wide ends of the feathers. Some you may want pointed. So you want to think about what type of feather you want when we're rolling it out, and you can adjust it with your fingers as well. So I'm going to kind of start a little bit here, and this is even going to be wider than I was thinking, so you could even go a lot more narrow with that. I'm going to start it out that way. We want to get it wide enough too, otherwise it kind of gets too narrow. We do not want it too thin on the sides, otherwise you want those to chip off. So if you wanted that tip rounder and fatter, just kind of bring that up. And that is really all I want to do. I'm going to leave that just a little bit thicker. One more thing we got to spray real quick is our mold. And there's all these different patterns in here. So even by putting it here or putting it here, you have a different feather. See how wide these are down here, and this is much narrower. But you can have feathers clear up to this length. We don't want to bring it all the way down to here. We want to start about right about there. And the fat end is going to be the bottom of our feather. And we want to put the middle in the center. And I am simply going to put this on, but what we're going to do is we're going to line this up. You see those mountain and ridges right there? You want to line those up. And that is kind of the key to making our feathers work well. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to push this down, and I'm in those grooves so I'm not sliding back and forth. And about this time would be really good to have a paper towel to wipe some of this off so you could work easier. Another way to get the oil off is to use some alcohol, the alcohol, rubbing alcohol. It helps the oil come off really easy. So we've pushed that down quite a bit, and you may not even want to have pushed it that hard if yours was a lot thinner. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? That is really, really cool. Now before I pick this up, I want to show you some things. Now my cinder ended up being right there instead of right in the middle. That's okay. I'm going to bring that guy a little bit in to close that up. This looks really good, but if you have one that doesn't, just simply trim that off. Get those nice and straight edges right there. So now we're going to take this off. You can usually pick it up, and that's kind of how I do it, or you could try just setting it down onto your wax paper. Either way, that is really good. Now, if you want movement in it, give it movement. If you want a curve in it, pick this tip up and curve it just a little bit. Just be careful. And you could even leave a stem on these, and that's easier to tie those onto a gourd or another item. We can come up underneath these. This is a Miriam Joy wax tool that I'm using right here, and give the leaf some movement. These movement in a feather is kind of important. It gives it movement, but it kind of flows. Now this is really, really fresh, so it's not staying as well. I like to do it maybe in about 10 minutes, and then it'll be really good. You can mess with this about for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'm going to show you how to use the embossing powder, which was what I like because I'm a little bit lazier when it likes to come to coloring. It's one of the easiest ways. It's one of my favorite ways to color QuikWood. And if you don't like the feather, roll it up, start again. We've got those workable women's, actually even with a feather, they say that this can go to 30 minutes. By 30 minutes it's getting pretty hard, but I bet because it's a feather, you're not doing that much more to it. You could really stretch that time to 20-25 minutes really, really easy and get away with it. Now I am going to tell you, if you wanted to paint your feather instead of using the embossing powders, the first thing you would do is let it dry completely for an hour. And after you've got all your movement and everything in it, just let it dry, let it get really, really hard. Come in again with your rubbing alcohol. I put mine in a spray bottle, and I just spray it, and I take my paper towel and just get all the oil off of that. That is to remove the oil so your paint can go on well. The oil does interfere with putting paint on it. You could try dyes, you could try your alcohol inks, you could try anything that you want to try and see how that works out for you. It would be different, of course, if you were using paper clay instead of QuikWood. So think about all the ways you can use it and what you have in your art room as well. And then once that's dry, then I would go ahead and paint it, Or even if you wanted to just have it like white, then spray it with white spray paint and then varnish it. And we'll go ahead and talk about varnish while we're waiting for this to dry. Just any spray varnish is what I'm going to use because I'm using embossing powder. If you used different types, if you were using your alcohol, or excuse me, your acrylic based paints, you could use a brush on varnish. So use what you have, again, use what you're comfortable with, but also whatever type of item you're painting with, what works best with that. So we're going to give this guy a little bit more time to dry here, and once he's a little bit stiff and we paint the front side, I'm going to go ahead and let him harden up the hour and then flip him over. And because he's got the oil on it, it will still pick up the embossing powders. If you didn't have as much oil on it, you always could kind of even spray, I don't know if you want to do it directly, but maybe even on your hand and then wipe it again on that, and then it would pick up the I say embossing powders all the time, and I'm so sorry for that. Pigment powders is what I am using, not embossing powders. Forgive me for that. So the pigment powder on that. So let's let that dry and we'll start painting him. Another thing you can do before that, once you've got the mold down, even before you put the movement in, is you could cut into these lines to give it more movement and look like it's flowing more. And you would just simply follow the line up. And you want a real nice, sharp knife, or what do we call those tools? X-Acto knives, just to cut these, and I wouldn't put a whole lot in. On my peacock feather, I did more at the bottom, and a lot of feathers have less at the bottom, but be careful. You don't want to go too thin because that'll be very fragile. So I even think that that right there is perfect enough, and if you wanted more space, just kind of separate it just a little bit with your X-Acto knife. And continue to let it dry. Your pigment powder, or sometimes I think they refer to it as mica powder, it may be a little bit different, you can find in your scrapbook section at your craft store. There's also bluewhalearts.com that sells individual ones. The other ones kind of come in packets. So that is something good to know. I've got this kind of where I would like it. I want to do yellow with this one. The one thing we're not going to do, and I'm going to be using like a mop brush, but even if you have just an old brush, you can use that too. But don't take this and go straight from there to there. You've got a bunch of powder on there, so you want to pounce that off in the lid and then just come back and forth until you need to add to that. So I'm going to do this guy yellow. And what's great is you can put accent colors in and just play with it. Again, do whatever you're comfortable with. I did add a hole here. I did want to talk about that. Make it as big as the item you would put through it. If you're going to hang it with a piece of leather, you'd want it wide enough that that leather could go through. So you may use like a barbecue skewer or something wider to make that hole, or the end of your paintbrush would probably also work to get that in there, but also make sure you have enough room between the hole and the outside that that's not going to break off. And then you're just going to decorate it. Also, another great thing to do to look at feathers, Google feathers on your computer, and look at them that way. See how turkeys are, pheasants, if you want a more natural. There's some great exotic birds that we know that have beautiful color, brightly colored wings. So, or if you have something that you need to match, you can kind of match it with that. So I'm going to put a little bit of green in the middle of this. And apple green is what I'm going to use. Let's see if I got a little bit smaller brush. Just right down the middle here. If you wanted to do like an eagle, you could do, you know, white with a little bit of black or different things like that. So think about what you want and the projects you're working on to use it on for. It'd really be great for dream catchers because you can make your own feather for dream catchers. But you may want the leaf or the ends just a different color. You may want the tip just a different color. Just however you really see your feather. It's totally up to you. Make it yours. Now I'm going to add a little bit of gold to my yellow, just here and there, to give it that little extra something. And not just that much, but just kind of where I think a highlight should be. Add a little bit. And if you had some places where you thought it should be shaded or something instead of highlighted, you could do a darker color. So now at this point in time, I'm going to see how dry these guys are. These guys are pretty dry, so I can go ahead and flip it at this time and do the other side. And you would just want to be very careful. Now remember, that was the top part, so this is going to be reversed. Now if this was real dry and you flipped it, those would just settle down. So you may just want to let that dry a while longer and then flip it. So I'm going to also use a spotting technique. And see all that brown spots? If you look at a feather, they usually have something like that on them. You could use acrylic paint, water it down just a tad on your paint or your toothbrush and kind of flick it, but flick it further out here so you don't get so much on there. But I have a walnut ink, and this was in the scrapbook section, and it kind of does the same thing. And see, even me being that far back, I got so much on that's a lot. So I might go back over it a little bit again. But I'd rather you see me mess it up and do it. Usually I wanted to kind of have it in the frame, is why I was doing it so close. I'll have it about a foot or farther, and I'll even kind of shoot up and then kind of come down, and that usually works really well. But I'd rather leave my mistakes in, so if you do something like that, you can kind of know how to fix that. At this point in time, I would just go back over it again, paint it again like I was doing, because geez, that took me so long to do. And then you could just try it again, or you may think that that's enough brown in there and just leave the brown just like it is and not add any more. But there's so many ways to play with that. Just have fun. I hope you enjoyed this. To order your feather mold, come on over to miriamjoy.com and you will be able to find it there. You can always email us at art@miriamjoy.com if you have any questions. Share our videos and help us to grow. God bless.